Hey everybody, and welcome to the intersection of sports and marketing. I'm Brian Cristiano. This is episode number 32 of OUTOFSCOPE, How Pro Athletes and Brands Should Work Together. I spoke with Jamie Bozzo at Sports Management about representing athletes and working directly with brands. All you marketers out there need to listen to this.
Sports marketing expert Brian Cristiano.
Brian Cristiano.
Marketers and advertisers and brands always have to keep in mind, you have to play to the state of your audience.
Endurance sports athletes are absolutely fanatics.
Having a Facebook page doesn't get you any business, but doing it right can be quite effective.
Well, Jamie, thanks so much for coming on OUTOFSCOPE. I'm excited to speak with you today.
Yeah, this is exciting.
Yeah, thank you so much. So to kind of introduce yourself to the audience for people that may not know who you are and what it is that you do, you're a sports marketer, you deal with players and teams and brands, and you represent these players. Tell me a little bit about what it is exactly that you do and who you represent.
Yeah, so we're actually a sports agency and we handle everything for the players from contracts to taxes to estate planning. But now marketing and social media and personal appearances and memorabilia, that becomes a huge role in players' lives. So I kind of handle all that. We represent hockey players, past, present, all the way, from the minor leagues to the NHL, and anything related to that. That's kind of where I come in and I handle all that for them.
Awesome. Very exciting. Very exciting. I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure it must get kind of crazy and exciting all at once, especially during the season.
It does. And it's hard when you can't physically be in two places at once. So that always gets a little tricky. August is actually our only slow month, so to say. Hockey's one of the longest seasons. So we start right back up at September and we go all the way until the end of July. So this is my kind of downtime, but come September, I'll get crazy. I already have stuff scheduled already for, September. So it's starting up already, but.
Well, perfect. Thanks for giving up some of your free time to chat with me.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of tell me a little bit about what is it like managing players, their day-to-day lives, their contracts, and their marketing side. What is that like?
It's a little crazy at times, more just because, social media even at this year has taken a whole new life of its own that especially the older players aren't familiar with it. So that's a big thing that we have to, work on here is educating them. And even the younger kids where, there's rules and stuff, so to say, certain guidelines that I try to have them to follow, but it's kind of just making sure everything fits into place. And, the other tricky thing is sometimes getting marketing stuff for players that there isn't really a lot out there. Sometimes the player can be great and really marketable, but if he's not in a good area, it doesn't really matter, who you represent. If it's not in a really good situation, it's not going to happen. So it's kind of like, I'm also under the philosophy where I'm very protective of our players, so anytime they do a personal appearance, I make sure I'm there. You have to be careful with people with phones and cameras everywhere and Twitter now and Instagram. One thing can happen at a public appearance or an event and it ends up all over the internet, and, the player's whole reputation and life and career could be ruined. So that's one of my biggest rules is I make sure anytime they're going to be at any type of appearance, especially public, that I go with them.
Right.
So
that's great. And getting into the social media side of it, obviously that's a very difficult balance because you want them to be very strategic and smart and polished about what they do so that there's no negativity. But at the same time, the fans want the real players to be talking and engaging with them. How do they strike that balance? And what are things that you tell your players that you represent to keep in mind when they are on social media?
it's funny. About 2 years ago, I guess, we represent Marty St. Louis, who just recently retired. And I said to him, I'd like you to get a Twitter account. I think it's important to have. And he said to me, well, can you explain to me what Twitter is? And if you ever try to explain what Twitter is, it's actually a very hard thing to explain, and you wouldn't think it is, but I'm like, it's a social media platform where people tell what they're doing. And he's like, why would people want to know what other people are doing? And it's a hard thing to, discuss and cover. what I really try to tell them is, um, you don't need to oversaturate it. You don't need to send out 50 tweets in a day. And be careful what you tweet. Be careful. If you have any doubt in what you're writing or sending out, then just don't send it. A lot of times they'll send it to me first and they'll say, "Is this okay?" And even the way Twitter works, it's a whole different language that people have had to adapt, between a hashtag or tweeting at somebody and retweeting and favoriting a tweet and stuff like that. You have to learn the whole lingo, so to say, that social media takes on. So I always say to them, just be knowledgeable and just be careful. We get a lot of hate messages on Twitter. We get stalkers, we get crazy messages, you get negative stuff, you have to report stuff. So it's a lot. It's crazy how one thing, or even, with Instagram and all those combined, take on a whole new life of their own. So I just really tell them to be careful.
And how important is it for players, young and old, to be a part of social media? How important is that for a personal brand?
It's funny. I not at first was against it, but I was kind of under the impression, like, let's not force them if they really don't want to.
Right.
And most contracts or any marketing deals that come in now to our office that are even approached, every single one will say, this includes 12 tweets or 12 Facebook posts or 12 Instagram pictures. So every single one usually has that component in the contract or in the offer. And most companies are really pushing to not take that out, where I can take out something else, but they're like, no, we want that. So it's almost becoming a necessity.
Wow.
And even thanking people, the effect now even celebrities have had with professional athletes, tweeting at them, tweeting with them, and all that. It's sometimes made people's whole careers, so it's almost becoming a necessity in some ways.
Do you find that the younger players adapt to it a lot faster than some of the older players?
They do. They absolutely do. Which is a good thing and a bad thing, because sometimes the younger ones, it's more like, okay, you need to stop posting this. You don't need that much stuff. And it's not as much about your buddies, back home or wherever. You really need to take this on a serious level, because a lot of companies don't want to take that and have you tweeting out about one thing that's almost nonsense and then tweeting out about their company. The followers have no interest in reading that then. So I kind of have taught them now, let's filter it out. Let's only put good content in. But it's had positive effects though. I mean, Marty St. Louis, when he retired, for example, posted a picture to thank, everyone for reaching out to him. And it was one of the most heartfelt pictures. And it was him coaching his son behind the bench. And it really made a huge impact on social media for him, for his family, for the fans. It just showed the true side of him and why he was really doing something. And that platform never existed before like that.
Right. It definitely puts them out in the limelight on an instantaneous basis.
Oh, yeah.
For good or bad. Now, obviously, there is some negativity that can happen, whether, because of the player or just generically because of the audience. Do you find that it's easy to turn that around, or is it more difficult when it's on social media to either A, contain it, or B, change the conversation into something positive?
You kind of have to be tricky. You have to be quick on your feet. And, it's definitely becoming more difficult, because if you do something wrong on social media, there's always 10 people behind it to back up with, whether it be a picture, whether it be a comment or something. And the way that, it's crazy to me that, I've been doing this for over 11 years, how quick social media can take off within 10 seconds. I mean, you can delete a tweet. And I mean, as I'm sure you know, now with screenshots and all that stuff, a tweet is never really deleted. So you really I always say to them, you always have to own up to it. If you make a mistake, the best thing to do is to apologize and admit you made a mistake, because we're human. We all are going to make the mistakes, but trying to cover it up, so to say, or whatever, just own up to it and say your apology. And then the real key, like you said, is changing the conversation and trying to get it, more positive into something else. So it's always a little tricky. But I always say to them, just sit back, relax, and take a break then from social media for a little.
Right, right.
It's
Go grab a coffee.
exactly just go do something else.
Yeah, go play
So
around and golf. So, but you would say then that obviously, some transparency and honesty goes a long way because that's what people
absolutely,
want.
absolutely. We're getting to see inside people's true emotions, their feelings, how they feel about real issues. Um, and we never used to get that. So just be honest, be who you are too. I never ask them to do something that they wouldn't say, or, send this out, send this tweet out, and they wouldn't even talk like that. Be yourself. That's the real draw.
Right, right. And do you find when you are partnering up brands to your athletes, whether it be on social or just in general, do you find that there needs to be some sort of connection between that brand and that person?
Absolutely.
Does it come across as fake if it feels forced?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have to say the brands are pretty good usually about narrowing in on what type of person they want. Um, we did a big deal last year with Tori Krug and Kraft and the Shaw supermarket, and they took a picture. There were giant stand-ups of Tori all across these Shaw supermarkets in Boston, and people took a selfie with Tori, and then they uploaded it to a website. It was a huge campaign for them, and it did well. And the second component was a personal appearance at a supermarket. Now, I know Tori Krug is one of the nicest people you will ever meet, and he's great with the public. He genuinely loves it. He's funny. I knew that that would be a good fit for him. He goes food shopping, so I knew that like taking him into a supermarket, he knew the brands we were representing, and he was great with the public in that atmosphere. So I do always think there has to be some type of connection, because or else it does feel forced, and the company doesn't want that and I don't want that. It portrays my athlete off in a bad way. So there does have to be some happy median, so to say, that there's some type of connection.
Right. And what's the balance on getting your athletes exposure and attaching them to different brands and marketing? Obviously, it's a profitable thing. That's a source of revenue for the players, for your company, et cetera, which is a good thing. What's the balance of accepting marketing and saying no sometimes?
Yeah, and my biggest thing is you can't saturate the market. There's nothing worse than seeing the same person every single place. There's no brand identification there. So you remember that you saw the athlete, but you say, I don't remember which ad I even saw him in. So it's really pick or choose. And sometimes the players are like, this sounds like such a great opportunity. And to them, they're like, okay, let's do it. And I say, you know what? Let's just take a step back. You're already doing XYZ in these places. We don't need more of that. It's kind of a little bit of overkill. So you have to take each company, example, opportunity, and really go through it and just see if it's the right fit for you without just oversaturating stuff.
Right. What have you seen in the last, 5 or 10 years, especially now with social being such a big component of marketing? Have you seen have requests from brands changed drastically? Are you seeing different types of requests for athletes different now than you did 5 or 10 years ago?
Absolutely. I get a lot of requests to tweet something out on Twitter, and that's all they want. Which that to me seems a little forced sometimes. So that's a hard balance that we have to make sure we support the company. I mean, we have no relationship with the company, and to just send a tweet out, it doesn't really make sense all the time. And that's really hard, so to say. But it's such a difference now where that never used to happen. And that never was even a question. So and it's constantly evolving, that you think you finally caught up with it, and then there's something new, and then there's something different. So, I mean, it's just changed dramatically. But like I said earlier, every single company, almost everyone has it in their contract that they want something related to social media.
Wow, shows how important the brands see it.
Oh yeah.
Have you gotten any bizarre requests for marketing from players, like really weird stuff from any brands before?
Sometimes I get the player who will contact me and they'll say, "Oh, my friend has a startup company and they asked me to tweet this out." And I say, "Do you know anything about the company?" And they're like, "No, I'm not really sure. It's a good friend of mine though." And I'll Google the company. I'll be like, "Absolutely not." That happens a lot. Sometimes they want players taking pictures, doing stuff that's just so crazy that I'm like, I would never even ask him to do that. And I would never want that on social media. So that's where it gets a little funny. Um, but sometimes the requests are just outrageous for what they want done in general. And the other thing that's hard is these players don't have a lot of time. Um, and some require a lot of time commitment and they just don't have it. It's a long season, so they just don't have the time commitment to do it, and some companies aren't familiar with that. They ask for like 10 days and I'm like, I can't get them for one, I mean,
Right.
10 is just crazy.
Right.
So
Right. Um, Let me ask you a question. Two questions actually before we wrap this up. What is a good tip that you could give to a brand or an agency or marketer that would want to partner up with a player? Something that they should know or be aware of, or a good tip when they're presenting an idea or reaching out. What's something that a brand or an agency should know about that?
something especially in hockey is that, sometimes what you see on the outside doesn't really reflect the true personality of the player. And that's something that I wish, brands almost knew ahead of time. And I try to stress it as much as possible where I say, if you got this guy, I'm telling you, you would be so pleasantly, surprised and happy because when their true colors come out, it's different. What you see on the ice for us, or even what you see on the field with other sports, isn't always how funny the person is, how personable, how sociable they are. So keep an open mind and don't always form a judgment on based on their athletic performance. Because sometimes their personality behind it is just so fabulous that they end up going above and beyond, and the way they come off for the brand is even better than they could have asked. So
That brings up an interesting question. Do some players have a very different persona on the ice because that's their game plan versus when they're off?
absolutely. Some people say, we represent Brooks Orpik on Washington, and he's known as a tough guy, and he is the nicest person that I've ever met. He's just genuine, he's just a great person in general. He's a great husband, he's a great dad, and he's just a great person. But that also hurts in a negative way too, is that, fans in general, especially in this industry, have notions of these people based on the field and based on how they are supposed to perform and how they perform there. And it's a hard thing sometimes to break that for a marketing campaign, whatever it is. So it's whatever the viewer or fan or customer really perceives the person to be. So
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, there's definitely, and I assume when you're at that level of any sport, you probably have to put on a tougher act on the field or on the
yeah.
ice than you do off.
Yeah, and sometimes it's so natural to them that they don't even
That's part of the
realize. And I'll
sport.
say to them, I'll say, people think you're such this mean, tough guy, and they're like, really? They don't even realize it's just when they're into their game and they're doing their game, they have a certain way to play, and then when they come off, they're just some are funny, some are quiet and shy, some are goofballs and characters, and so it's hard sometimes get convincing a brand too. I promise you, off the ice, they have a great personality.
Right,
So
right. And my last question is for anyone who might watch this that's an up and coming athlete of any kind or wants to eventually be pro or might be slightly off the radar but's kind of working their way up. What's a good tip for them to understand about personal brand?
my first biggest thing is you always have to surround yourself with people that are going to take care of you and represent you in the way that you want to come off. And always don't try to be something you're not. People catch on to that too quick. There's too much around happening that your true colors always come through. and just be careful, make smart decisions. If you think, like I said, if you think something isn't right to put on the internet, put on, Twitter, or even do, then just don't do it. And that's really the thing. And, it starts all the way down, even at a young age, that stuff you do when you're 14 comes back to hurt you when you're 25. So that's really the biggest advice, is just make smart decisions and surround yourself with people that can really protect you and your personal appearance, and your personal brand.
Awesome. Well, Jamie, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and all the great tips and insights. It's been super helpful.
Thank you so much.
All right. Woo!